Okay, good afternoon, or good morning actually. I called it the power of one. It's a really tricky thing to sort of work out what on earth does one say. I guess for all of us in our day-to-day lives, we have a conscious decision either to stay in the organisation we're in, but a lot of people only make the conscious decision when they decide to leave. You know, when this gets too bad, I'm going to leave, as opposed to every day I'm going to make a conscious decision to stay in this organisation. That's a very powerful thing because it starts affecting the way we operate. Anyway, if I was introducing myself to you when I was about 15, I'd say I'm Marcus Orowski, a schoolboy. I think we use the word student these days. A few years after that, I'll be Marcus Orowski, economics graduate. A few years after that, Marcus Orowski, trainee at Deloitte. Wow, joined a firm of international management consultants. The first job I got was bloody trainee. Have you ever gone to a company and you've seen somebody with the labels and then somebody's called a trainee and you go, oh dear, I better deal with somebody who knows what they're talking about. So a few years after that, Marcus Orowski, director Ernst & Young, now called EY. A few years after that, Marcus Orowski, director Stanhope. Sounds good now, doesn't it? A few years after that, Marcus Orowski, director Occam Green. Now I've got no idea what I want to do, so I just call myself an explorer. Has anyone else here ever thought you're a bit of a fraud? You know, they expect me to know the answers to everything. I've got no idea. I'll just make it up. And people sort of go, whoa, yeah, you've really done a lot of research. Has anybody here done the research in the taxi on the way to the meeting in which you're supposed to express an opinion about something? Honestly. So that's me. This is a photograph taken of Death Valley. Death Valley is one of the least hospitable parts of the planet, and that's what it looks like most of the time. But unbeknown to a lot of people, it does rain occasionally. Now, what's happened is that the seeds in Death Valley have somehow developed some sort of wax coating which protects them against a bit of rain. But if there's a lot of rain, it can be washed away. And if there's a lot of rain, then what the seeds are exposed to is a humid, warm environment, which is exactly the right environment for seeds to germinate, isn't it? It's exactly the right environment. That only happens when there's about 25 centimeters of rain, which happens on about a 25 to 50-year cycle. When it does, magic happens. The last time it happened was 4 years ago, and that is what Death Valley looked like for about 6 weeks until it all went back down again. I just wonder how many people are here when with the right amount of rain, the right amount of help, they could become that. I just wonder. And I wonder how much talent is there which we can't see. The trouble which we have, in most cases, we divide people into cohorts. It's a really easy, really interesting thing to do. I work a lot with schools, and you hear year 7s, year 8s, and all the rest of it. This is a photograph taken of teddy bears. They're all exactly the same, made in the same factory by the same people in the same amount of time, and yet they're all slightly different, aren't they? In fact, a lot of people say, whoa, that one looks like you could turn nasty. I better separate these two. I have no idea what this one's talking about, but I'm going to have a word with them. The trouble is people, we sort of lump them together, like graduates, like first years, all the rest of it, and they're all different people. They're all different. And that becomes trick because graduates and people come in different shapes and sizes, different colours, all sorts of things. And if we just treat them as all the same, as a commodity, we could be really missing out because there are 7,000 million people in the world today, and in about 10 years' time, there are going to be 8,000 million people in the world. There are more people living today than have ever lived. Damn, that really puts a difficulty on us. You know, there are 30 million people who subscribed for first-year courses in the People's Republic of China. 30 million. In 2 years, there'll be more graduates in the People's Republic of China than the UK has got people. So what are we going to tell her? Have you ever had a conversation with somebody who is so uncontaminated by the perception of day-to-day reality that they can floor you with a series of questions, usually the same question, just beginning, why? Has that ever happened? Why are you doing that? I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I'm 50, you're 3. Yeah, I've no idea. And that's a great thing. Because today, in today's world, it's not just what you know, is it? It's also who you know, and probably even more importantly, how you know them. If you know 1,000 people and they all think you're an idiot, better not to know anybody. On the other hand, if you know loads of stuff and nobody knows you know, there's no point knowing it. And that becomes tricky. So we get history. This kid will always be known as the boy who stuck his head in the polypropylene chair. And you know that will follow him for the rest of his life. Has anyone here ever had a nickname and you try to get rid of it and you just can't get rid of it? And people do stupid things, you know, intelligent people with committees and all the rest of it end up with bonkers responses. And you will see people doing things which you know are really stupid. This is Westminster Tube Station. I stopped there and I went to see the station master. I said, who or what is Private Rod? I felt there's some poor sod ex-serviceman stuck in an office with no windows. And no. Rod, it's not a rod, it's ROD, risk of death. If you go in there, there's going to be 65,000 volts, you get vaporized. I said, well, it's probably better not to call it private rod and put a door handle on it, if that's okay. Further on, if you go to Blackfriars, you've got a cannibal there. Private 8. And you go, what on earth is going on? Welsh language. We've got to translate things in Wales into English and in Welsh. There it is. No entry behaviour goods vehicles, and there it is in Welsh. I went on to Google Translate to see what it says, and it says, I'm not in the office at the moment. Send any work to be translated. So somebody knew they had to translate it, went onto a website, it came back, poof, instantly. And you go, wow, those guys are absolutely fantastic. And you get this stuff. If you can find a disabled, elderly, pregnant child, you don't have to worry about your income for the rest of your life. And we do so two funny things because we get caught in these mindsets. This kid was told to write a letter to Santa Claus. So the poor sod wrote a letter. Dear Santa, how are you? This is what I want for Christmas. http www.amazon.com and all the rest of it. But you'll find that this is what's going on. In the way of learning, what you tend to find is we start off by not realizing we're incompetent. You know, I just don't realize I'm crap. And then after a while, you go, oh God, I am. I now realize I am rubbish. After a little while, you might find that you can be consciously competent. It's like seeing somebody who's driving for the first time. You know, they're driving along. And you keep your eyes on the road because you know that if they take their eyes off. After a little moment, we become unconsciously competent. And that's when you learn to drive, and then suddenly you can do it, and you can drive down the road, you can do all sorts of... Has anybody here ever driven to the wrong place? You know? So I can do all the stuff which I never thought I'd be able to handle, and now I can do it so well I can do it almost in my sleep. The trouble with doing it in your sleep is that we can come up with the wrong questions. Look, this is a question in a school. Write the answer 36 plus 47. You must show you're working. Okay, the answer is 83. I'll show you my working. That's me. Now, I think that is a brilliant solution. But in most schools, would you be marked up or down? And you can look at your own organisation. If people come along and just take it, do you reward that or not? And yet we're all saying we want creative, interesting, dynamic people who are fearless. But we get caught in mindsets. Most of us can use an escalator. We're okay with it. But most of us find it significantly difficult if the escalator is off. Has anybody found that to be a rather difficult thing to do? You walk up to it, oh, damn, it's off. And you'll see people saying, how the hell do I get on this thing? Even better, you see people getting on it, they go, as they adjust. And when they get to the end, I've seen people stop and say, how do I get off this? Has anybody else found it a really tricky thing when an escalator's off? So we get caught in these mindsets. Here's a mindset. Which of the vertical lines is longer? The one on the left or the one on the right? Who thinks it's the one on the left? Who thinks there's one on the right? And the rest of you? Oh, well, they're not the same size. The one on the right is 25% shorter. So why did we all say the same size? Because we've learned it. The mindset is, that guy, he ain't so clever. You know, we know all this stuff. And that's the trouble. We get caught in a mindset so we don't even look. So here we go. Which one's longer? One on the left or the one on the right? Who thinks the one on the left? Who thinks the one on the right? Who thinks they're the same size? Who at the moment is a little bit nervous about expressing an opinion? Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They are the same size. And some of you will be saying, I was going to say that. I was going to say it. But I didn't. And that is part of the issue. What do you see here, ladies and gentlemen? Just tell me what you see. Oh, I don't know. I'm involved in training and development. I can't... What do you see? What do you see? What do you see? So who sees a man and a woman doing something? Having a good time? Happy time? And who sees dolphins? Well, this is the test of human sexuality. If you can't see, look, here's a dolphin. Here's a dolphin. Here's a dolphin. The whole lot is dolphins. If any of you thought it's a man and a woman, it's just the gaps between the dolphins. But we have a mindset. We build it. And what we see, we then stick by. I wonder how many of us get caught up in that. Because all of us have got a destiny of things we can do. But we get clouded by history. It's the mindset, it's the way I operate and all the rest of it. I bet in this room, some of you know you could do much better stuff if only my boss would get out of the way. I bet some of you have met people and you go, how could an absolute idiot like you end up in a job like this? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is reality. That's reality. So what do we tell that chap? You know? And as you see people develop, you can say, well, where's their future going to be? And what's all the stuff I might accidentally be doing which is going to stop that from happening? How many of you remember being at school, you get a question and you don't give the answer which you think you want to give, you give the answer which you think the person who's asking the question expects you to give. And that usually happens in training and development, ladies and gentlemen. It's a really hard thing. What do you think of our company? I think our company's crap. Oh, do you? might not be an allowed thing to do. It might not be a permissible thing to do. So what are we doing accidentally? This is a lovely woman, Cheryl Lee, and she runs a special school. We got given this sort of school. It looks a bit rubbish, and it's a school for special kids. Typically with special schools, the expectation is these kids aren't going to do very well academically, but they'll probably make things. And so we said, well, if they're going to make things, then we should have a shop so they can sell them. And if they've got a hydrotherapy pool, maybe we should open a spa, because then people who are recovering from an operation or recovering from a break, instead of going to the NHS to get rehab, maybe you should go to a spa and get... But if you go to a spa, they don't have any physiotherapy. Do you sort of see? So why don't we do that? And if you've got a hall, why don't we do conferencing? And you know, we probably should have a cafe. Why don't we do that? Because then maybe some of our kids will develop the strategies of dealing with the real world, as opposed to in a special school, you get educated until 19 and then you get dropped off the edge of society. Do you sort of see the thing? And people said, oh, blimey, look, you know, we got given this school, by the way. It was really rubbish. It had been taken over by squatters and all sorts of stuff. And everybody said, you'll never be able to, what are you talking about? It's a special school for profound multiple learning difficulties. Spa? Don't be insane. And anyway, so there it is. It's called the Beehive. If you see, it's cafe, retail, wellbeing, spa, conference hall, education, provision. It doesn't say welcome to the Northgate Special School and all that sort of stuff. You walk in, it looks like that at night. You go in, there's a bit of retail and stuff kicking around, and there's a cafe, and so we've got some upscaling retail. And this was a drop-in. All these people dropped in the summer holidays. This is not kids from the school. These are just people coming in for a cup of coffee and wanting to buy stuff and doing all the rest of it. This girl is fantastic chef. That boy is severely autistic. Within 6 weeks of opening the school, Visa card, who came in around the conference there, would you rather run a conference at a school where you're doing good, or would you rather run the conference at the Marriott Hotel? Well, obviously you'll do it at a school where you can do good, provided the quality is good. And the guy who was doing catering for Visa said, can I recruit him? It's not the school saying, can you take one of our kids? They really need to, do you mind if I recruit him? Well, of course you can recruit him. And so there's the spa and all that sort of stuff. And this is not impossible, ladies and gentlemen. It's just looking at the mindsets. What are our mindsets caught up in? This is another school which we turned into this. It's not impossible to do these things. It's not impossible. We just have to clear the mindset and say what's possible. This is a school in Yorkshire, and that's an area for kids to do their post-16 studies, which the kids came up with themselves. It's not difficult, ladies and gentlemen. It's not difficult. And so it's just a matter of understanding who are people and where do they fit and how do they operate, and we take them out to meet interesting people and to do some cool stuff. Because the world today, you can argue, are you supported in the world or are you a bit on your own? If you have to buy a new mobile phone, do you think, oh, there are loads of people who give me advice? Or do you think, whoa, I've got to make I'm on my own here? And then you can say, in general, is the world complex or easy? Me, I spend most of my time in this sort of area. I'm doing stuff which is quite difficult and I'm a bit on my own. Does anybody else feel like that? But if you look at the world of education and all the rest of it, what we tend to do is we tend to make things really, really, really simple. We simplify them. We do that in training by accident. We call it simulations. And we do it here because it's a controlled environment. I know what to expect and I can support you through your journey. If we made it complex, and I'll support you, that's really time-consuming because I don't have time to do all that sort of stuff. If people can do it anyway, and you just let them get on with it, well, then what do the teachers or trainers do? I've been to some schools where they're teaching French to some kids who are French. And you go, well, why don't you let them do it? Well, I'm the teacher. And you will find that in your own organisation. You will find stuff going on where you're teaching people stuff, or you're training and developing people stuff, which they can do it already. Which is a waste of time, isn't it? Because if it's complex and you're on your own, it's unpredictable, it's difficult to assess. But that's when you really get to see what can people do. I mean, really get to see what people can do. So most training and development operates down here. And here's the classic. Here's the classic. In a school, I'm talking about schools, in a school with a load of kids, we said, make a movie. You've got 2 hours, 18 minutes on stuff the school should start doing, continue doing, or stop doing. And this was to a bunch of kids aged between 7 and 11. And they did. And I'd just like to show you what they came up with. No tuition, no training, no nothing. And this is what they came up with. Have a look at this. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was done by those kids in 2 hours, 18 minutes with no tuition, no anything. They had to choose the music, they had to get the associate, they had to script it, they had to film it, they had to put it all together, and they had to give it to us in 2 hours, 18 minutes. So what the hell is the point of teaching them phonics when they can do all of that? Do you sort of get the idea? I wonder how many people in your organisation can do that sort of stuff. And then it becomes exciting. Does anybody here feel you're a bit undervalued? You could do so much more if we could just get my bosses out of the way and do all that sort of stuff. And I think that's powerful, because then we can start doing some really, really, really exciting things. So now you know a little bit about what I get up to. I work with schools. So last week I was in Prague talking to a bunch of students. They pay me to go around and talk to them. Can you believe that? And next week I'm in Rabat, in all this sort of stuff. As well as designing schools, as well as working with kids, as well as doing what I can do. That's my life. And then there came the test. I hadn't explored, I hadn't expected it. I had a brain hemorrhage. And that's what happened to me. I lost all of that. I couldn't see from my left-hand side. I was stuffed. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where it was. I couldn't do it. All my cognitive functions like disappeared. And I was hearing people saying, oh, a lot of people in that condition make a near normal recovery in about a year. And I was hearing, a near normal recovery? A lot of people in about a year? Well, get stuffed. Because that happened 4.5 months ago. Except I was due to give the opening speech to the National Association of Head Teachers annual conference in front of 200 people, and I had an hour, and I had that in 2 weeks and 3 days. So I didn't have time for all this stuff. So the expectation was a lot of people will do that sort of. That's what happened to me. And it was interesting, because what I saw loads of charts, and the health service was sort of saying, you know, we'll take it easy, relax, it'll be okay, it'll come back. But I've got 2 weeks and 3 days in order to give an opening annual conference for the National Association of Head Teachers. Do you sort of get the idea? I don't have time for this. I've got a short circuit. I've got to find out what's wrong. So what I did, as soon as I was released from the main ward, it was all about that, is I went out of the doors, and I went down the road, and I left the hospital, and I went off to Siemens, was the organisation where I had my stroke. And I wanted to say thank you for looking after me. Except as I walked along, I realised I'm not very good at walking, and I can't talk very well. You know, so when I got back to hospital, I said, look, I've been off to Siemens, and I've realised I can't walk very well, and I can't talk very well. Do you think they went, yes, we can now work on a gap analysis? Or do you think they put me in complete doo-doo land? You left the hospital, how dare you? And they took my clothes away. So once I found them, guess what? I went off to Waitrose. And then I realised I've lost all my passwords. I can't do any of that sort of stuff, because this lot happened, and it happened on September the 26th. And I just didn't have time. And it was really interesting to see what the expectations were. And I think that's the what if. It's the what if people can really do stuff. So there is me giving a talk at the National Association of Head Teachers. So I think what happens is by accident we have a lot of this stuff going on. We can't see the stuff which is just waiting to be rained on, which is waiting to be unleashed. We can't see it. And then we go, wow. And I bet we all know some organizations where some people weren't succeeding very well. They left one organization, they joined another, and they became stars. And you go, how on earth did that happen? What didn't we see? And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think is training and development, if that makes sense. It's cutting through all of the stuff and trying to see what happens. And just if you want to play with just words, a lot of people sort of say this, opportunities nowhere, I'll just move around with the space bar and I'll change it totally. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our challenge, is it not? So thank you for listening to me.